Okay. All right. So last two classes, right? For me, you guys saw how Cucumber works, right? We got plain English, and then underneath we have the code, right? And this is one of the biggest seller for Cucumber because you have the steps isolated from the code, and it is easier for people to understand and easier to maintain. It produces, or at least it allows you to reuse code in a better way, right? So reusability is there for any language, right? Reusability is there for most of the programming languages out there, right? But how is it different for Cucumber? Cucumber allows you to reuse while you don't have to even remember the method name, right? Because it's just a plain sentence. As long as you know what the sentence does, and sentence describes by itself. So if you really, um, that really optimizes the reusability, right? So sometime maybe, you're following object-oriented programming and you're doing Java and Selenium only, there will be reusability, but it'll be taking some time for you to understand what's there to reuse. Compared to Cucumber, the steps are already in plain English and you're not even looking at the code just yet. So you will not be wasting a lot of time. Instead of reading through the code, the 10 pages and finding the method, you are just looking and reading, and then you can look into the code and say, wait a minute, this says it will close the browser. So let me look into it. Let me see what if it's doing the right thing. So that is the difference. And many times manual tester, right? Manual testers that cannot automate, they can still automate because these steps in your company, if they're right, um, then you will be able to reuse them. There is a chance you don't have to write a new line of code to automate, as long as you know how to reuse them. So if you see, if they give you an assignment and you're looking at the test cases that were written before, then all you have to do is just read and understand what steps they're using, and then you use steps that are common for your test case. So there may be a chance where you don't have to write so many steps, and at least 50% or 80% of your test case will be done before you even write some code. One of the important thing about Cucumber is that also we can group our test with tagging. So our last class we learned how to do Cucumber. Today we're going to learn some tagging, and that'll be it for Cucumber. Then I'll be moving into Jenkins, which is CI/CD tool, right? And I'll explain what Jenkins is, and that'll be it for the day. And then remaining people will go in the market, and we may be starting a new batch by next class. So we just need to coordinate, and to make sure that it is happening next week. But if the class starts, you guys are going to be welcome to start. It'll be everything start over again, right? So that's the way it'll be. We're still working with the newer candidates to make sure that we are able to start by next week. So we'll let you guys know. But for the time being, I think that today's class will complete everything. We were missing Jenkins, so that's what we're going to touch. And I'm going to be completing Cucumber with grouping the tests, right? So let's say at work, you have a lot of test cases in Cucumber and you want to group them. So group them as a regression, because this test case may qualify to be inside of regression suite. Instead of copying and pasting and putting them into a single file in Cucumber, what we do is we just put this tag in front of them. So when you say regression, that means, right, that means that um, you are grouping them as regression. So if I call the regression, then it will run both of these tests. It will not run these two. Okay, it will not run these two. So if I go to terminal, and this is a command line way to run tests. If I do Cucumber only, the command, right? CUCMBR. If I do Cucumber only, it will run all of the tests, right? Because I have not specified anything. Now, if I do this, tags, and then I do regression right now, then it will run only these two tests. Okay, then it will run only these two tests, right? So batch cucumber. Okay, we need to configure this. Something is wrong with the bash. Okay, so if I do this, then it will run these two only. If I remove this, then it will run only this one. Okay, so just understand how do we tag. This is almost very close to test ng annotations, but we are creating our own. Here with the tagging, there is a lot of things that we can do. We can have before and after hook, where we can specify if this tag runs, then we want to do something special. We can actually look at the tag by tag and do something very special. And I'm not going to get into that. That is very advanced. Very few automation guys know about that, and I don't think we're going to need to cover that here. But that's how we group our tests. So the question is, how do you group your tests, or how do you make a regression suite? All you have to do, go through your feature files and see which test cases qualified to be in regression, and then you are going to be adding them to regression suite. What is regression? Who can answer a question? What is regression? Regression testing. Who wants to answer it? What is a regression test?
Hello.
Yep. Listen, go ahead, Marcel.
So, Java regression testing is to rerunning the functional and non-functional test to ensure that all the developed and test software will perform perfectly after change.
Okay, but you're missing key pieces, right? You're somewhat right. You're maybe like 50% right. Regression testing is when you are adding, or so when you're adding new functionality or feature, and you are maybe modifying the existing feature to the extent where you know that it will affect the existing features and functionality, or it may change existing features and functionality. We want to make sure that it didn't, the newly added functionality or newly edited functionality did not alter or change any of the behavior, or any of the feature in the application. And we want to check to make sure that nothing else has been touched, only the intended part of the application is, right? So that's when we do regression testing. Regression testing is nothing but you're choosing major test cases, the test cases that pretty much are responsible for overall, um, I would say overall application, right? Represent the overall application, right? That the major part of the application is needs to be covered by regression. Um, Regression suite is bigger than smoke suite. So what is the difference between regression and smoke? Smoke is you are just making sure the application is healthy. You're doing a health check. So if you're doing a health check and you go to a doctor and they just basically simply they ask few questions, or they just look at your temperature and it's done, right? So that's sort of like smoke testing, because they don't go all the way above and beyond. They don't go and take your blood tests and everything, right? They don't do all of the tests. When they take everything, your blood tests, your weight, your height, your, like, let's say your temperature, anything and everything about you, then we're talking about is a regression, because now they're going deeper. They're trying to find out the application is not only healthy, but it is functioning based on the requirement. It is still functioning the way that we want the application to function. Then we have system testing. System testing is any of the system means software, right? Software. And then if you say software testing, it just basically means that any of the test cases you ever written, any of the test cases that your company ever had, all of the test cases, when you execute them, that is system testing. So I'm just putting into a simple form, but when you go out there and look at online, you're going to see the definition, right? So it's good to know the definition, and then also because once you know the definition, then you're going to be able to explain on your own word. So just, when you are going to the market, make sure that you kind of, at least the least thing you want to know is the testing itself, right? When you imagine like you're a tester and a recruiter calls you and they said, you know what, let me just ask him few basic questions. And they say, hey, what is, you know, let's say, what is a regression test? And you're struggling. What does it say to me as a recruiter? As a recruiter, I'll say, okay, this guy 120%, you know, fake, because that is something that you do, right? That is the only job you have, is that you test an application. That is the only job you have. And you're not able to describe what regression is, right? So just know that, right? Like, for example, manual testing process. Like, what do you do from the beginning to end? If you're not able to explain, that means, you're saying that that's my job, that's the only job that I did for the last 6 or 7 years, and but I cannot explain to you. So, like I said, communication needs to be 110%, for you guys. And even if you feel like you're not communicating well, just keep trying. Just keep trying. Don't get discouraged. No matter how you're doing it, keep trying. It will improve over the time. It will definitely improve. But if you're not trying and you feel shy, or you feel like, okay, you know what, I'm not gonna do it, then you're never gonna improve. Just think about it, right? If you're looking for improvement, then yeah, even if you feel like it's not enough, keep trying. Keep talking to them, keep explaining to them. Use your summary script and keep talking to them, and it will, at some point, it will make the improvement. Usually what I see is that after 2 weeks of marketing, you guys literally sound different, or at least you guys sound different. You guys look like you guys have some experience. You guys worked in a company. That's how you sound like. And also, there are some people that I've seen, is that they go to the market and there is zero changes. Is because they are not communicating. It's because maybe they are not picking up the phone call, or it's because they're not emailing back, or they're not concerned at all about the interview. So so just keep that in mind, who you want to be. You could be here for 2 years, or you could be here for 3 weeks, from today to get a job and be out there. All right, so that's about Cucumber, guys. So that's how we group our test to make sure that we can make system, we can make regression. So in grouping, when you group them, I can also say that this is a system test, right? So all of the tests will be covered as system, because what? Everything, anything and everything is system, right? So if this is a system, then let's say this test case also qualifies to be in smoke. I'm not putting a comma or anything, right? So I can always tag them with multiple tag name. Now, if I want to run it, I can simply say smoke, it will run this one. I can say regression, it will run this one, or I can say system, it will run the same test. Is because they're all tagged with the same. You can have multiple tags to make sure that you can run multiple, make sure that you can run a test with the specific tag name. Now, if I have a tag here that says, let's say, system and smoke, right? Let's say. So then it's going to happen is, if I say smoke, it will run two tests. If I say system, it will run two tests. If I say regression, it will run only one, because regression is not here. So know the difference. All right. So the next thing is, let me just go into. All right, so what is Jenkins, right? In CI/CD, Jenkins is 110%, something that is very, um, I would say in CI/CD, Jenkins is more, it's open source tools, because there are other tools, not only Jenkins. And 1 second. Okay, so what is Jenkins, right? That's one thing. Jenkins helps you to do CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous development, right? Continuous integration and continuous development has a meaning, right? And what Jenkins does is allows you to make these two process easier, right? Because continuous integration means like you're continuously pushing code, right? You pushing code so often, right? And continuous development, that means you're developing continuously, you're developing and you're pushing code, and it's happening very often. So what does that mean? That means there is a lot of repeated task, meaning once you, so these are steps to build a software, right? So for example, we get the requirement, then code, then QA, then release, right? So these things are happening so rapidly, meaning in the morning they got the requirement, coded, and QA is done, and the release is happening by the nighttime, or release is happening by 5 p.m. And I'm saying daily basis, right? And requirement doesn't mean, oh, it's a huge requirement. It could be like maybe like a very small story, right? Something maybe changing a very slight of, let's say, small changes, right? It's a user story, for example. So maybe let me make that user story because people are gonna get confused. And this approach that you are going and taking a story and getting everything through and pushing it when you're ready, that is a Kanban approach. Kanban, right? Kanban, you guys know what Kanban. Kanban, agile Kanban, right? So that means you, as things are coming, you, as a developer, you pick that up and you code them, and then once you finish coding, then QA will do the QA, and then release is happening by the same day. Okay, that's called Kanban approach. So that means one story is done, and that is the same story. So a single story could be going by itself. It doesn't need another 5 or 6 stories, but also it doesn't need to wait for anything. There is no time frame. So that is kind of an approach. In Agile, same thing happening, but we are not going to release same day. We're going to release in 2 weeks, right? After 2 weeks, but we take stories and we gather and put it into a specific QA server, test them, and then we go, right? So Kanban says, okay, you know what? We don't have to wait for 2 weeks. If I have finished one, then I will push that one. But what if I don't finish anything today? Then I don't have to, right? Tomorrow, let's say I finish two at the same time, like as a team, and I'm talking about the whole process is done in as the entire team did the whole thing, maybe two stories done tomorrow, then they will push that tomorrow. Day after, if they don't have anything, then they will not push it, right? So, and also, how do they get the stories? Stories are already prioritized in a backlog, and you are just there to pick them up. That's it. You're just gonna pick them up. There is nothing that says, okay, here are the stories that will be worked on the next 2 weeks. No, it's nothing like that. It's just picking it up. So that's how the Kanban Agile looks like. And if this was an Agile Scrum, right, there is different, right? So versus Scrum is different, right? And Kanban is different. So now Agile Scrum, you would have sets of story for the 2 weeks. You guys will have planning, you guys will grooming and everything, daily stand-up meeting, and then you guys will be start working on it, and you still have 2 weeks to kind of breathe and be able to do it, take it easy pretty much. But here it's like things are coming and boom, you got to test. Things are coming and you just got to test and finish and release. So now every time the release happens, the developers, like if the release to the production or release to the QA, the developers, they have to do sets of tasks, right? So release task is basically you are going into a server, right? First of all, you have to prepare a server, right? And once you preparing the server, you're basically um, is going to update the code, right? You're gonna pull the newest code, right? And you will merge that new code. But then this preparing of the server itself, it takes maybe half a day because they have to do so many things. Now, what the CI/CD comes in play here, or Jenkins comes in play here, is that whatever you need, whatever task you need to update your server, your QA server, it will be automated. So nobody has to sit around and just do this over and over and over again each and every day. The release process is simply a click away. Okay. So if it's a Kanban, and imagine like release is a click away. That means as soon as QA says, hey, it's looking good, then somebody clicks on it and boom, it's released already. Okay. And something goes wrong, they can click again and it will roll back, meaning it will put the code back to original state before the release. So once, if they have something like that, they will always have a rollback button, right? Meaning they will have a rollback plan to make sure that if something goes wrong, they can easily roll back without having to have any sort of bigger issue. So so imagine like they didn't have Junkin, right? By the way, there are other tools. Um, Azure is a well-known one, Azure DevOps and Junkin. They're like, think about they do the same thing for you. And I'll explain how Junkin works in a second. But so basically somebody just go ahead and press a button and it will go ahead and do everything. And how does it really work? How does the server preparation is done through Junkin? Okay, so let's take a look at that. So what Junkin is basically, it's a software, right? Junkin is a software, let's say, so let's imagine this is a Junkin software, right? So this is a Junkin software, for example, like a horrible drawing. 1 second, I'm just gonna fix that. So forty, 32, maybe better. So now this is a software, right? Right now by itself, it can't do anything. It doesn't live inside of any server, right? So anytime you build a software, you need to have a server for it, right? In order to have this Junkin do something, or at least the software do something for you. So then you take the software, you install it where? You install it to a specific server. So this may be a Linux or Unix server, right? So I'm gonna just say L or U, and I will label that as a server. So now you have a server that you install this software into the server. So now this becomes what? This becomes basically master Junkin, right? So Junkin now live inside of this server. Okay. Now this primary goal, or at least the what Junkin can do right now, this software, right? This software, what they can do is that they can control other machines when you give Junkin the right permissions. So what the Junkin software do, it can control another machines, it could be virtual, it could be real machines, right? And that's where the Junkin is. So once you're hosting it in a server, now you can say, Junkin, please go and do this for me. So you're saying, let's say this is your QA server, right? And let me just go ahead and make this longer. Okay. So you go into your QA. Okay, let me just. So let's say this is your QA server, right? And this is where you deploy the code. So you're telling Junkin, please take the latest code from the developer or latest code from GitHub and release it here. And Junkin will simply give you a button to do that. So you click on the button, it automatically deployed to this server. The server is made, deployed, and the server is made, configured, deployed, everything by Junkin itself, right? And that is how the, 1 second. I gotta draw another one for staging, and then maybe a production one, right? So guys, I will be back. I'm gonna take a 5 minutes break. I'm gonna go get a coffee. You guys, let me pass on I'm gonna pass on. So Jenkins software, we installed it into a server, and now in this software, it gives us a UI, graphical user interface, right? It gives us a UI to set up a job. We call them job, right? A task is a job, right? We can set up a job that will go and create a new machine or new server from AWS, right? Cloud. So it will create a new server, and then it will put the code that the developer pushed, and then it will make it available so that that way the environment is ready to be tested. So it can be done that much. So once the developer says, hey, I pushed my code, from there on you can go to the Jenkins and you can click the button where it says, okay, launch or whatever, or build. Usually it says build now, right? So you click on build now, boom, 10-15 minutes later you have a URL ready, meaning it created a server, it deployed the code and everything, and you're now ready to test it. Similarly, if the QA server, everything looks good and you give your okay, then it can go to staging, right? So staging is basically more stable. Staging environment is for UAT testers, or maybe your product team wants to validate something, but the staging has more realistic data. This one doesn't have realistic data. So that's why staging is different. And sometimes you want to test in staging too. You tested in QA, you want to also test in staging. So that's something you have to call yourself and say, look, we need to test also any staging to make sure that there is no issue, right? So it's nothing wrong with checking it again, but in staging, the product team or even the UAT team, they do the testing. And now you'll see some time where you tested here in this server, the code, and then basically you give your pass and it goes to staging. And now the UAT team comes back and say it failed. Right away you shouldn't go in a panic mode and say, wait a minute, no, I tested this, I know for sure this is. You just say, okay, it maybe there is some discrepancy between two different environment. This is a QA environment, this is a staging environment. So you want to see the difference, you want to find out, you want to investigate, you want to find the difference, and then you want to reach back and say, hey, looks like there is some discrepancies between two environments. I will work with the dev and to make sure that that is resolved before it goes to staging. Okay, so how does it look like in realistically, right? So if I say QA server and you work for Facebook, then this server will have a URL for you to test with, right? So let's say the URL is, and again, the URL is decided by who? Anybody, right? In the team, like for example, whoever set up this job, they can decide the URL. So the URL could be something like this. It would be like QA. So if you work for Facebook, then it'd be like qa.facebook.com, right? And that's it. This is your QA server. Then you have same thing, you got your staging, so qa.staging.com, right? qa. Actually stage, this is how they go normally. The shorter it is better. And this URLs is not publicly available. This is only for QA team to use, and this is for staging. Now in your company, what the URL will be, I don't know, right? But it is gonna be similar. It will have, the URL will have some resemblance of QA or staging. Otherwise, nobody would know what staging and what QA, right? If everything is same looking, they don't want confusion, right? So then you lastly have your production, right? This is the production environment. Production, what does production means? Who wants to answer that in the meantime?
I think the real environment.
Production is where the real customer is, right? People who is using the software and getting benefit for themselves, right? Or doing their part of the business. So if you are on Facebook and doing your regular things, signing up or adding friends and making new friends, or even messaging, that is something that you're doing your personal, I guess, kind of like personal activities, right? Where this application is allowing you to do it, right? Now you're not going to go into QA or staging to do this. Oh, sorry, this one should be stage. dot fb, and this one should be, so if you work for Facebook, what should be the URL here for production?
www.facebook.com.
Right. So it will be Facebook. I'm not going to put www. Okay. So just now it's https:// www at facebook.com. Right. But anyway, so this is how you're going to see 3 different server. Now, if this CI/CD was not present, then every time they have a release, somebody had to do this manually. Somebody has to do this manually, and somebody has to do this manually. And therefore, we're talking about days. We're talking about a day it will take. So every time you want to release, it will take a day. Every time you want to release, it will have some issues. It will always have some issues, because as a human being, every time you are doing the things yourself, there will be some differences depending on who's doing it. And you always depend on the one person, whoever is more experienced on releasing. And therefore, that person is sick, then you cannot deploy that day. Right. So there is a lot of issues. It's time consuming, and you have a problem. Like, for example, the order of the tasks. So for example, creating server first, and after that you want to run some code, right? So what if you don't run the code and you go into the next step? Something, right? Like similar to that. Imagine you do it in the production. You're going to be screwing things up, and it'll be a big mess every single time. So that's why Jenkins comes in rescue and do all of that by itself. Simply what Jenkins is that Jenkins is a software that allows you to control other computers. Like, if you really think about it. So Jenkins is a software that lives inside of a machine. It could be cloud machine, right? So think about, this is a cloud machine like a Linux, and this is the software that is living inside. So that means it was installed. At this stage, Jenkins will ask you, which machine do you want to control? Give me the address, right? So from here, you can control X amount of, right? It could be, I don't want to say thousands, because I've never seen thousands of softwares being controlled, or sorry, thousands of machine being controlled by Jenkins. But you can go about controlling hundreds of, computer, as long as you give it the right permission. So the way it works is that you have a public key. For every computer, you have public key and you have private key. Okay. And now this Jenkins will say, hey, give me the public key of that. Sorry, take the public key of this Jenkins and put it into the machine that you want to control, right? So this is the machine that we want to control. So what Jenkins need access to this machine in order to control it. So what we are going to do is we take the public key from Jenkins. This public key belongs to Jenkins, right? We take that and we put it inside here as a known host, right? We put inside of it here and we put it as a known host, right? Therefore, every time this guy sends a request, this guy will say, oh yeah, he's known, right? And it will accept it. So what's happening is that Jenkins is going into shell of this machine, meaning going directly to his brain and telling it something. Therefore, we're going to be using shell script, right? So we're going to be using shell script to create a job to make this, to control this software. And we want to then do something to the software. So if you want to basically, so imagine this is your shell. This is the shell of Mac, okay? So once, if I'm building a job to control this machine, then I'm going to say, okay, first connect. So imagine the connection is done, right? And where is the public key, by the way? Public key is, if you look into it, okay, so nano, then, okay, first let me see, where is my SSH file? So cd.ssh, right? I'm inside of SSH right now, the SSH file. So I'm gonna do ls, and now I can see that I got the public key and I got the regular public key, private key. Private key we never share, okay? Because otherwise anybody can control your computer. So public key we can share to get our self access. So if I give this public key to another person, then I will be able to control their computer as long as they put this as a known host. So now If you want to see how this public key look like, you can just say nano id rsa.pub, and boom, this is how it looks like. The whole thing, it's a big one, right? It's gonna go all the way. It's gonna go all the way, right? So I'm gonna exit out now. Control X, I believe. Okay, there we go. But if you say like cat id dot pub, that means cat means like I just want to copy it. That's there you go. It just copied it. Look, the whole thing. The whole thing is the public key. Okay. Um. So basically, every computer has that, right? For Windows, I don't know where that belongs to, but it also have the public and private key. Now, um, so assuming you already provided the public and private key, the access is there, the access is granted, then you can say, okay, now into the new machine, I want to cd into a file called projects, for example. Oh, I don't have projects file. Okay, let me go into the home. Okay, cd projects. I don't have project. Okay. So let's say I want to go into BDD test, right? So if I want to run this test, I'm going to say BDD test. That's the first thing I'm going to do, CD. Then I want to run what is this button? No, okay. I'm going to do cucumber on it, right? See, cucumber, right? And notice the command is not found is because we haven't configured that command. So now if cucumber command would be able to run the test. So if this is a Maven, then we can say MBN and let's see what does that do. And already Maven is doing its thing. So you can say Maven test, MBN test, and it should probably run the test. There you go. It started running some stuff, right? As you build this success. So, so, so this is exactly what the Jenkins will do for you, right? You have to provide the shell script. You have to provide this script right here. This is actually the shell, right? This is the shell command, and you'll have to build a script with it to make sure that Jenkins gets that and to be able to execute into the new machine that it creates. And that is essentially what the Jenkins is. Now, as far as the Jenkins, how it looks like, I don't want to configure here. I think I did it once, made my computer too slow. We're not going to go too deep into Jenkins because the number one reason, okay, let me go into this, is because as a QA we don't have too much work in Jenkins, right? And this is how the Jenkins jobs looks like once you build a job, then you see build history, and this is where you kind of create a new item. You click on the new item, and then you give your item's name, click OK. Once that is done, you provide your shell script just like this. Look, you see. Once the shell script is done, then now it says build now. Okay, so that is specific. That is specific um, task will be start building into the new machine. Okay. um, and I was simply able to just explain to you through just going through Google email, Google message. Now if they ask you in an interview, what did you do with Jenkins, you're going to say, well, I ran our regression tests. I went to the build. This is your job, and you basically kicked off the build and run it in Jenkins. Your team, your DevOps team actually build the job, right? So you don't necessarily have to know what Jenkins is to be a QA engineer, right? That is something the DevOps team takes responsibility. This is DevOps sort of work, but you can say you help them build the job, but mostly it was usually like the job is created once and then you never have to go back to it, right? You just click on build now and it'll start writing, running, whatever you want to do with it. So that's why I don't want to go too deep into it. I want to be able to put people in the market, as many of you guys are already there. So there's only 2 people that is left as far as I'm concerned right now. And I'll be sending you guys the resume soon. With that said, I'm gonna be stop recording and then let's talk about interview, because which probably will help. So I know people will have questions, even Faisal, but Bazir, anybody with any sort of questions, go ahead and start asking.